Two officers stopped a black man on a deserted street, accusing him of a crime he hadn't committed. They had no clue he was the state's chief prosecutor, determined to expose their lies and the corruption within the system. What unfolded next stunned everyone, but let's rewind to the beginning. David Miller, a tall, middle-aged black man dressed in a sharp navy suit, strolled through the peaceful suburban streets of Woodrest. It was late, and the glow from the streetlights stretched long shadows across the empty road. David was heading home after a long, exhausting day preparing for a high-profile case. The briefcase in his hand felt heavier than usual, but his mind was consumed with thoughts of his strategy for tomorrow. As he turned a corner, the familiar blue and red lights of a police car flashed down the street. David paused, instinctively raising his hand to show he wasn't a threat. The cruiser rolled up beside him, and two officers got out. "Evening," said Officer Barnes, a burly man in his 40s with a cynical smirk. "What are you doing out here this late, walking home?" David, keeping his tone even, replied, "Is there a problem, officer?" Barnes exchanged a look with his younger partner, Officer Grant, who seemed unsure. "Got a call about a burglary," Barnes said, folding his arms. "You fit the description." David blinked. "A burglary? I just left my office downtown. I'm a lawyer." Barnes scoffed humorlessly. "A lawyer, huh? What's in the briefcase then?" "Stolen goods." Grant shifted uncomfortably, staying silent. "I can assure you," David replied, "it's legal documents. You're welcome to take a look." Without asking, Barnes grabbed the briefcase, ignoring David's protests, and began rifling through the neatly stacked papers. "Huh," Barnes said, feigning surprise. "Looks like someone's trying a little too hard to look innocent. This is harassment." David's voice grew firm. "I haven't done anything wrong." "That's for us to decide," Barnes snapped, stepping closer. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "What grounds?" David demanded, his patience running thin. "You have no evidence." Resisting an officer, for starters, Barnes growled, cuffing him roughly. "Let's see what else we can add." Grant hesitated, but then reached for his radio. "Dispatch, we're bringing in a suspect," he muttered, avoiding David's gaze. David was shoved into the back of the cruiser, his heart racing, not from fear, but from anger. He stayed silent, vowing that this injustice would not stand. At the station, David was escorted into a stark, fluorescent-lit booking area. The air reeked of disinfectant and stale coffee, the distant hum of ringing phones and muffled voices adding to the oppressive atmosphere. Officer Barnes, with his smirk as sharp as ever, took charge of processing David, while his younger partner, Grant, stood uncomfortably by the door. David's belongings were stripped from him methodically: wallet, phone, briefcase, each item catalogued with a careless efficiency, as if they'd already made up their minds about him. When David was shoved into a small, cold cell with steel bars and peeling paint, Barnes began typing up the charges in the next room. His report portrayed David as a dangerous criminal: burglary, resisting arrest, and possession of stolen property. The truth was irrelevant. Barnes spun a narrative to justify his actions, embellishing every detail. Grant stood nearby, arms crossed, his jaw tight, wrestling with some inner turmoil. His silence spoke volumes. Complying, even at the cost of justice, was the easier path. Through the bars, David could hear Officer Barnes boasting to another officer in the hallway. "Another one off the streets," Barnes chuckled. "Can't wait to see the look on his face when the court throws the book at him." David's hands balled into fists. The man who had dedicated his life to dismantling systemic racism was now its victim. His pulse pounded with a blend of anger and resolve. He wasn't going to walk away from this. He was going to fight. The next morning, David used his one phone call to contact his legal team. By noon, his assistant, Rachel, stormed into the station, armed with a stack of evidence that not only invalidated the charges, but also hinted at Barnes's misconduct. Within hours, David was released. His freedom was hard-won, but it was just the beginning. As he walked out, his mind was fixed on one thing: exposing the corruption that had nearly destroyed him. A week later, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Every seat was filled with spectators, reporters, and legal professionals eager to witness the trial. At the prosecution table, Officer Barnes lounged confidently, his expression one of smug assurance, while Officer Grant fidgeted beside him, his discomfort evident as he avoided eye contact. Between them sat Patricia Reynolds, the district's formidable star prosecutor, known for her tough-on-crime stance. She sifted through her notes methodically, offering only a brief glance at David as he entered. David, however, walked with the composure of a man who held all the cards. His tailored suit and calm demeanor commanded attention as he approached the defense table, placing his briefcase down with deliberate precision. The room quieted as the judge entered and called the court to order. As the proceedings began, David stood, his voice steady and clear. "Your Honor, I will be representing myself." A ripple of astonished whispers spread through the courtroom. Barnes's smirk faltered, and Reynolds shot David a sharp, scrutinizing look. This unexpected move was not part of their script. Over the next hour, David systematically dismantled the prosecution's case with surgical precision. He began by presenting video footage from a nearby ATM, time-stamped to prove he was nowhere near the scene of the alleged burglary. The clarity of the footage left no room for doubt. Then came the bombshell, an audio recording from the squad car. The courtroom held its breath as Barnes's voice blared over the speakers, mocking David and admitting that no suspect even matched the description of the alleged criminal. Irrefutable. Finally, David called Officer Grant to the stand. The young officer hesitated, his hands trembling as he was sworn in. Under David's measured yet pointed questioning, Grant cracked. "It wasn't right," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "There was no evidence. Barnes told me to make it look legitimate." The courtroom erupted in shock and murmurs. Barnes jumped to his feet, shouting, "He's lying." But the damage was done. The truth had shattered their facade, leaving only the wreckage of their lies behind. With the case crumbling, Reynolds abruptly requested a recess, but David wasn't finished. He rose once more, his voice steady. "Your Honor, there's one more piece of evidence I'd like to submit." He approached the bench, handing the judge a file. "This is my resume," David said, turning to face the room. "Before the officers arrested me without cause, before they fabricated charges, I was preparing for this week's trial. You see, I'm not just a lawyer. I'm the chief prosecutor of this state." Stunned silence filled the room. "And I will not stand for corruption," David continued, his voice rising. "Not in my office, not in my state, and certainly not from those sworn to uphold the law." Barnes paled, his bravado gone. Reynolds looked down, defeated. The judge called for order, and within minutes, the charges against David were dismissed. But the fallout was far from over. David filed a formal complaint against Barnes, leading to an internal investigation that uncovered years of misconduct. Barnes was stripped of his badge, and Grant, though complicit, cooperated fully, earning a second chance under probation. Weeks later, David stood at a podium outside the courthouse, addressing a crowd of reporters. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about a system that allows injustice to thrive. But together, we can change it,